Hey guys, what up? Tony here. My heart, my vision, and my passion is to take God's message of purity to the world. The Power of Purity is a 501c3 nonprofit, and like any other ministry, the reach and impact of what we're able to accomplish through the power of purity is predicated upon the finances that we have available. In view of this, we need help. And it's only because of faithful ministry partners like you that the Power of Purity is touching lives literally all around the world. Would you consider making a donation or becoming a monthly partner with this ministry so we can continue to unleash massive amounts of destruction upon the kingdom of darkness? Every dollar you give is tax deductible, and every dollar will be used to advance the healing message of purity to a world that desperately needs it. If you've been touched and encouraged by the Power of Purity, and if you believe in the message of this ministry, would you prayerfully consider becoming a monthly partner? If so, you can visit the Power of Purity website at www.powerofpurity.org, and at the top of the page is a donations link where you can become a vital part of this ministry's impact. Thank you so much for your love, your prayer, and your partnership. God bless you.
Welcome to the Power of Purity podcast, the show that empowers men to experience their sexual gift in a healthier way. Now here's your host, Tony Ingrassia.
Hey guys, what up? I'm glad that you're with me today. Welcome back to the Power of Purity podcast. And as you know, I recently began a new series of episodes which I've entitled 10 Things Every Man Should Know About His Wife When It Comes to Sex. And I've actually developed two companion series, 10 Things Every Man Should Know About His Wife, and the second series is 12 Things Every Woman Should Know About Her Husband When It Comes to Sex. And this happens to be part 3 of this series, where I continue today with principle number 2 of these 10 principles. And in the first episode, I actually shared the introduction to this series. And then in last week's episode, I shared principle number 1 of the 10 principles, which was this: your wife wants you to know that healthy sex occurs within the context of a healthy relationship. And with that being said, guys, it brings me to the second principle of the 10 things every man should know about his wife when it comes to sex. And that second principle, where we're going to jump right back in today, is this: your wife wants to know that she's the focus of your sexual exclusivity. And guys, I just advocate that this concept of sexual exclusivity is at the very heart of the biblical teaching concerning human sexuality, and therefore is also the very heart of the message of the Power of Purity. Sexual exclusivity. Or said another way, God's will, plan, and design for human sexuality is that there should be a sexual exclusivity between one man and one woman for life. And there can be a lot of different ways to say this and to talk about it, but in the end, they all arrive at the same conclusion. And this means that a husband and a wife together pledge sexual exclusivity to one another, which means they will never, ever express their sexual gifts apart from one another in any way. And this means, therefore, that they alone are the subject of one another's sexual desire, interest, attention, focus, and expression. This means that I, as your husband, will never express my sexual gift apart from you as my wife in any way, and that you, as my wife, will never express your sexual gift apart from me as your husband in any way. And that means I'll never look at pornography apart from you. I'll not masturbate by myself apart from you. I will not lust after other people. I will not have an experience of phone sex or cyber sex or massage sex. I'll never go to a strip club. I'll never use a prostitute. I'll never have an affair. I'll never kiss another person or become emotionally involved with another person, because any and all of these things would be an expression of my sexual gift apart from you as my spouse. And therefore, my pledge is that I will never do any of these things, because you alone as my spouse are the sole subject of my sexual desire, interest, attention, and expression, or what I'm calling sexual exclusivity. And further, this concept of sexual exclusivity means that as your husband, my body belongs exclusively to you as my wife. This means that my eyes, my hands, my tongue, my mouth, my penis, my orgasm, my entire body in every way belongs exclusively to you as my wife, and I will only express my sexual gift, my sexual desire and passion, my orgasm exclusively with you as my wife. And it means that as my wife, your body belongs exclusively to me as your husband. And this means that your eyes, your hands, your tongue, your mouth, your breast, your vagina, your orgasm, your entire body in every way belongs exclusively to me as your husband, and you will only express your sexual gift, your sexual desire and passion, and your orgasm exclusively with me as your husband. This sexual exclusivity means that you as my wife are the only subject within the sexual frame of reference in my life. And by the way, this is what I'm referring to in session 11 of the Power of Purity video conference, which you can find at the Power of Purity website if you're interested, when I refer to the concept of what I call wife-size sex. And that's the name of that session, session 11 of the Power of Purity video conference, wife-size sex. Or said another way, if you're referring to a woman and the sexual frame of reference in her life, it's what we would call husband-size sex. And what this means is that as a man, the only thing that belongs in my sex box is my wife. That's the only expression of my sexual gift, and the only thing that belongs in your sex box, your sexual frame of reference as a woman, is your husband. So it's these ideas that are represented when we talk about this concept of sexual exclusivity. And it's this concept of sexual exclusivity that's at the heart of God's will and plan and design for human sexuality in general and for marriage specifically. And further, this concept of sexual exclusivity is very clear in the Bible itself. And although we can look at many different passages to affirm this principle, in the way of proof text to support this idea, I'll share just two that occur to me in the moment. And the first one is Exodus chapter 20, verse 14, which is only 5 words, and it says this: "You shall not commit adultery." So here it is, guys, within the context of the 10 commandments themselves, which are, in a way, a very concise review of God's will, plan, and design for humanity. And isn't it interesting that in the context of the 10 commandments and in the context of these 5 words, that God reveals so much of His plan for us regarding 2 very huge aspects and topics of our lives, which are marriage and sex. Exodus 20, verse 14, you shall not commit adultery. Or said another way, it's as though God is saying, look, you guys, it's my plan that you get married, because it says you shouldn't commit adultery, and we know adultery is when we have sex outside of marriage. So God's saying you should only have sex in your marriage. Don't commit adultery. Don't have sex outside your marriage. So God is affirming marriage as the context of sexuality, and he's saying don't take your sexual gift outside of your marriage. Or, said another way, sexual exclusivity. God doesn't want us to go outside of our marriage to experience sex. You shall not commit adultery. And the second proof text I would choose is a familiar scripture, Hebrews chapter 13, verse 4, which says, marriage should be honored by all, and the marriage bed kept pure, for God will judge the adulterer and all the sexually immoral. And again, isn't it interesting that quite clearly God is speaking to these same two important topics of our lives at the same time, which are marriage and sex. And quite clearly, God is saying that marriage is the context for sex. That's the way God set this thing up. And he says in this scripture that marriage should be honored by everybody. And then he goes on to explain what he means. How do we honor marriage? How should we honor marriage? And he explains, the way you honor marriage is to keep your marriage bed pure, which means that no adultery or sexual immorality should occur within the context of your marriage bed. Or said another way, there should be sexual exclusivity between a husband and a wife. And guys, in addition to these two Bible verses, I'd like to share one other observation that I think is pretty significant, and it essentially concerns the universal understanding and expectation of sexual exclusivity and faithfulness that exists virtually everywhere and with everyone, including the broader secular culture in which we live. So what I'm saying is, for a minute, let's just totally forget about God and totally forget about the Bible and totally forget about spirituality or the church. And what I'm saying is that I'm talking about secular people here, unchurched people, people who don't even believe in God, and they have no spiritual orientation and maybe no spiritual interest in their life whatsoever. But isn't it interesting to note that even among these people who have no spiritual interest or frame of reference in their life, that there's essentially this universal agreement and understanding and expectation of sexual exclusivity and sexual faithfulness within the context of marriage. Or said another way, virtually everybody essentially understands and expects that when we get married, our lives and our marriage will be defined by sexual exclusivity and sexual faithfulness, and that when and if this sexual exclusivity is violated in any way, such as by an affair, or even if one spouse catches another spouse secretly watching internet pornography, that in so many cases, it's so harmful and destructive and hurtful and painful and causes trauma in the context of that marriage. And it's exceedingly harmful to the marriage. And the trust is broken. And therefore, most people respond in these situations with a high level of hurt and anger and confusion and disorientation and upset and disruption. So I just think it's interesting, you guys, that it's somehow written, I think, in a way within the DNA code of human beings that we all basically universally agree to this expectation of sexual exclusivity within the context of marriage. So I thought of this metaphor. I just thought about geese, and you know how it's somehow intuitively written in the DNA code of every goose to fly south in the winter. And somehow virtually every goose just intuitively knows, and they have this instinct to fly south in the winter. How do geese know that? It's like they don't have a school that they send geese to and they teach them, hey, in the wintertime we all fly south, and yet they just know that this is what they're supposed to do. So what I'm suggesting, you guys, that in much the same way, somehow it's almost like God has embedded within the DNA of the human heart that all human beings have this intuition concerning marriage and concerning sex, that sexual exclusivity and sexual faithfulness is the way that we're supposed to do this. And of course, as believers, we know that this is because of God Himself, because sex was God's idea. God invented sex, and therefore God has an opinion and a will and a design and a plan for sex and the way He intended for us to experience sex. And God's design and plan has something to do with this idea of sexual exclusivity and sexual faithfulness in marriage. And therefore, it's as if this standard is just automatically imprinted in every human heart and soul. And we therefore have this automatic, intuitive, and spontaneous acceptance and understanding and expectation of sexual exclusivity and sexual faithfulness within the context of our marriage relationships. And to me, guys, it's just like the fingerprints of God, or it's like an echo of God that resonates intuitively within the human heart since the very dawn of creation. And guys, I therefore suggest that all of this, what we're talking about right now, affirms this second point of the 10 things every man should know about his wife when it comes to sex. And it's this principle that your wife wants to know that she's the focus of your sexual exclusivity. Or said another way, your wife wants to know that she's the only subject within your sexual frame of reference. She wants to know that you only express and experience your sexual gift with her. She wants the security of knowing that you do not express your sexual gift apart from her in any way. Or said another way, she wants to know that you're not double dipping or stealing orgasms or getting bonus orgasms apart from her. And she wants to know that you're not masturbating apart from her, that you're not secretly using internet pornography apart from her, that you're not going to strip clubs or using prostitutes or having an affair or expressing and experiencing your sexual gift in any way apart from her. And I might be wrong, guys, but if I'm a betting man, I'm betting that sexual exclusivity is incredibly important to your wife. And I can't tell you guys, as a pastor and a counselor, how often I see this over and over again within the context of my ministry, how devastated women are, how hurt women are when they discover that they have not been the sole expression of their husband's sexual gift, and they have not been the subject of their husband's sexual exclusivity. And women are profoundly hurt by this. And trust is broken, and it harms the relationship. It harms the marriage. It perpetrates severe damage when women find out that their husband has been expressing his sexual gift in some way apart from them. And with that being said, you guys, it occurs to me to share just one other thought with you concerning this. And I just want to acknowledge that while I do believe that this concept of sexual exclusivity is very important to and applies to the vast majority of most people, even secular people. It doesn't always apply to everyone in every situation. And, for example, there are people in so-called open marriages that say that they're all right with their spouse having sex with other people. I don't care if you express your sexual gift apart from me. I don't care if you do that. And I've been aware of many situations where the wife knows that her husband is using internet pornography, and she isn't bothered by the fact that he's doing so. And the point I want to make here, you guys, is simply this, that because people choose to think this way, and they choose to live their lives this way, it does not make their chosen lifestyle either right or acceptable in the eyes of God. And more often than not, I'd advocate that in reality, it reveals unhealthy issues that actually exist in the corresponding lives and marriages. And I'll give you an example. I was involved in helping one couple, and the man had a very serious internet pornography addiction that he could not overcome. And what was interesting was the fact that his wife didn't seem to really care about his problem with internet porn or his struggle. But as we worked deeper into their story, I discovered that in reality they were very broken and dysfunctional in many different ways. And the fact is, she didn't really want to have sex with her husband, and she actually preferred for him to use internet porn because the more he used internet porn to relieve himself sexually, the less he would pester her and pursue her for sex, and therefore she wouldn't even have to deal with her husband. So in my estimation, this couple had some very serious issues to work through if they were really going to be healthier together. And the fact that they were not committed to sexual exclusivity with each other was not evidence of their sexual health together, but was in fact evidence of their sexual brokenness and dysfunction, both as individuals and as a couple. So our second principle of the 10 things every man should know about his wife when it comes to sex is this. Your wife wants to know that she's the focus of your sexual exclusivity. And I have here in my notes, guys, something that I've entitled an optional story. And I guess I'll just go ahead and share this with you before I finalize this second point of the 10 points. And it concerns a conversation I was having with a young man recently, and this young man is married. And I was explaining to him my understanding and my concept of who God is and what God says about sex. And I was trying to explain to him the concept of wife-size sex, this concept of sexual exclusivity in the context of marriage. And as I was sharing this concept with him, and I shared with him that because of my belief in this and my commitment to this idea of sexual exclusivity, that I had not had an orgasm apart from my wife in over 18 years. And when I said that, he was obviously surprised. I think maybe more appropriate to say he was shocked. And he then told me in no uncertain terms that he thought that that was really weird, and that he didn't see anything wrong at all with masturbating by himself or treating himself to what I would call bonus orgasms when and if he needed to. And further, he said that he didn't think his wife would mind him doing this, even if she knew about it. And all I'm saying here, guys, is that I'm personally suspicious of this young man's assumption about his wife. And I'm wondering if that's the way she'd really feel about the situation if she was given the opportunity to make her thoughts and feelings known. So in other words, if I had the opportunity to talk to this young wife and to ask her heart and ask her opinion, and I was to say to her something like this, Is it important for you to know that you're the sole subject of your husband's sexual exclusivity? Or said another way, would it bother you if you knew that your husband was masturbating and having orgasms apart from you on a regular basis? And all I'm saying, guys, is that if I'm a betting man, I'm betting that there's way more women who would be upset and bothered by this behavior from their husband than there are women who would not be upset and bothered by this behavior from their husband. Or maybe here's another way to say what I'm trying to say here. Wouldn't it be interesting if we could do a survey of married women? And on this survey, we would give married women two options to choose. And they have to choose from one of these two options. And option number one is this. Your husband exercises sexual exclusivity toward you, and you're the sole subject of his sexual interest, activity, and orgasm, which means your husband will never have an orgasm apart from you. Or option two, which is this. You are not the sole subject of your husband's sexual exclusivity, and you are not the sole subject of your husband's sexual interest, activity, and orgasm, which means your husband has the option to masturbate apart from you and have orgasms apart from you. And so, guys, I'm asking you, which one of these two options do you think most married women would choose if they had to choose one of these two options? And again, if I was a betting man, I'd bet that most women, by a wide margin, would choose option number one, because I believe that most women would like to know that they are, in fact, the sole subject of their husband's sexual exclusivity. And thus, the second principle of the 10 things every man should know about his wife when it comes to sex, which is this, principle number 2, your wife wants to know that she's the focus of your sexual exclusivity. And with that being said, you guys, I see that I'm right at the threshold of the completion of this particular episode of the Power of Purity podcast, and therefore I do not think I should start principle number 3 of the 10 things every man should know about his wife when it comes to sex. And therefore, if you're interested in hearing and knowing what principle 3 is, I invite you to come back next week for our next episode of the Power of Purity podcast. We have now covered the first 2 principles of these 10 things that every man should know, and those first 2 principles were these. Number 1, your wife wants you to understand that healthy sex occurs within the context of a healthy relationship. And number 2, your wife wants to know that she's the focus of your sexual exclusivity. And with that being said, you guys, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this episode today. Thank you for being with me. I really appreciate it. I pray that these things have been helpful and encouraging and insightful to you on your journey of purity. I pray they will help you to understand your wife maybe better than you've ever understood her before. And I encourage you to come back next week where we will continue with Principle 3 in our next episode. And I'll look forward to seeing you guys then. In the meantime, God bless you. Have an awesome week. Have an awesome day. And be blessed by God as you continue to pursue your walk of purity. God bless you.
Thanks for listening. Visit powerofpurity.org for more resources and information. And if this podcast has been helpful or encouraging, please invite a friend to listen. Until next time, remember, there's power in purity.